Narcissistic children. It's a difficult, heavy topic, but it's a topic that does need to be talked about. And I've had numerous questions from you, from my viewers, asking me to record a video. So finally, here it is. It's probably going to be a lengthy video. It's hard to tell for sure how it will go, but I have quite a bit of material I wanted to present. So I wanted to tell you ahead of time to grab a tea or coffee or a cup of water and sit back, relax, and let's do this. I will start by giving you a little bit of a preview of the things we will be talking about here. I will start by talking about the early symptoms. How can you recognize as early as possible that your child might be at risk of developing narcissistic personality disorder or narcissistic traits? A bit of a lighter version, but still can cause quite a bit of concern and difficulty to raise a child who has these tendencies. Then we will look at 8 signs that a child already does have narcissistic personality, and I'll talk a little bit about the origin of where do these narcissistic traits originate? What is the cause? It's a very controversial topic, but I will tell you what I know, what I've been able to research, and what we know as in this domain as of today, as of now, although new research constantly is coming out. So I'll give you the most up-to-date version that I know of and make it as easy to understand as possible. And finally, we will end with a section about what a parent can do in order to cope. So what could you do? Because a lot of people that wrote to me who have narcissistic children, and that's their main goal. They're looking for answers. They're asking me a question. Okay, my child is, or could be an adult child, is displaying the symptoms. I think he or she is a narcissist. What do I do, right? And as a hint right now, although we will be talking more about this, I'll tell you that you're going to be doing a lot of the similar things that you would be doing should your adult narcissistic child be a friend or be your own parent or be a sibling or even be a partner. So boundaries is really what it boils down to, although there's a little bit more nuance in that I will be discussing. So let's start with, who are narcissistic children? How do you spot them? How do you detect them? The main thing is that you're going to start to notice 2 things. One is that such children tend to be very self-focused. So they don't seem to have much concern about anyone else or anything else that takes place outside of their immediate space. Very self-focused, very self-concerned, and they have a not very well-developed social skills. So when it comes to interacting with other kids, there's a lot of grit. Things are not going very smoothly. There's interference. There is this inability to establish eye contact or any connection with another child. There are frequent bouts of emotional tantrum display, lack of emotional regulation, and so on and so forth. And you can also observe the other child. I think that's something that just came to me. I didn't find that in the research, but you can, I think, observe the behavior of the child that's playing with the potentially narcissistic child to be able to tell that something might be off, because that other child, right, will be probably withdrawn, sad, disturbed, tired, right? It's very similar to how we are, how we function, how empathic people, highly sensitive people function in these kinds of relationships. What happens to us is we get drained. It's the same with children. The child playing with a narcissistic child you may notice these signs of fatigue. So I would also look for that. Now, something that I need to say right up front, it's a bit of a disclaimer, is that it is very hard to diagnose children with narcissistic traits or narcissistic personality disorder. And the reason why is because all children, and this includes you and me, go through a narcissistic phase, right? And that lasts a couple of years, usually starts around 2 and should begin to fade around 4, when the child begins to develop more social skills and more social interactions, and begins to notice that there are others in their vicinity, in their environment, and is able to also mirror back some of the emotions that they see in the adults and in other kids, right? So it's like we start raising children by mirroring them, but eventually they will begin to reciprocate that. And it's this reciprocation that is needed in order to develop empathy. So again, during this early stage, we're all narcissistic. It's just that some of us grow out of it and some of us never do. So in general, again, there will be familial and social relationship struggles. That's the early sign. That's the very general side. These kids basically have a really hard time making and maintaining friendships. Again, we're not talking about like super early kids, although really young children also develop attachments, right? If a child has this ability to form a healthy attachment, you should be able to see that fairly early. You know, they like to play with their friends. When the friend goes, you know, it's time is up. They have to be separated and go home. The child might be a little bit cranky and upset because they're forming this attachment. Narcissistic children don't tend to form these attachments. They don't really care. So let's look at the list of early symptoms. So first, this was just a bit of an introduction. Let's look at the early symptoms. There are 4 in particular that I wanted to highlight here. Number 1, there will be a little bit of repetition that you will hear in this video. This is intentional because this is how, you know, I'm structuring this information, and some of it is just really important. So the repetition is meant to highlight some of it. So the number 1 is the lack of emotional and social awareness. So the child doesn't understand his or her emotions. They don't know how to self-regulate, and they also don't understand and sometimes notice even the emotions of others. So, for example, a child might be unable to respond to the cues. So if they're playing together and one of the children is very disturbed, it's upset, it will not have a proper response to that. It will not, for example, try to soothe an upset child. It will not feel compassion or empathy. It will just kind of mind its own business and again, cultivate that self-centeredness. Another example would be that the child is laughing when the other children or the other child is crying, right? The response is not appropriate to the situation. Number 2 is lack of empathy. You know, this comes up a lot. This is a very important piece of the puzzle here. And you should probably know what that means already. It's just, again, that the child will hurt another, may cause some upset, may cause harm, but it will not feel any kind of responsibility for it. It will not, there will be no accountability. There will be not a sense of remorse. Again, this is very similar to how it is with adults. Now, the narcissistic child, potentially narcissistic child, might not even need to be the one causing the harm. Say a child trips and begins to cry. You know, a healthy child that has the ability to feel and understand his emotions, maybe not understand it in a cognitive sense, but be familiar with it and be able to respond in a healthy way, might also get sad. So there will be that mirroring present, whereas a narcissistic child, again, will not care. They don't have the ability to put themselves in the shoes of another. And this, again, we want to stretch this now from like a 4-year-old, 5-year-old child, which we might be, I know I've been imagining as I'm giving you these examples, we need to now stretch it out to an older child, right? 10, 12, 15, 16 years old, because these traits will be sustained if there is a problem. So these kids will feel indifferent. Someone cries, someone feels upset, they won't care, you know, and they will be concerned with themselves. Where's my phone? Where's my food? Where's my this? Where's my that, right? It just doesn't matter what others are feeling. And I think that this is very similar, I know, to how I felt, and I know how many of you have felt in narcissistic relationships, where when things are going well, right? When there's laughter, when there is sparkles and joy and fireworks, the narcissist is happy. Whereas the moment that you get upset or something sad happens or there's a problem, the narcissist turns around and they want to walk away. They don't want to have anything to do with it, right? And I'm not talking about, you know, what some people who are highly empathic may experience after years and years of supporting others day in and day out, and eventually they get burnt out. So another thing happens, another shitstorm takes place, and they just can't take it anymore, and they just need to, you know, draw the boundary and take care of themselves. I'm not talking about that. I'm just talking about this complete disregard, this disconnection, this dismissal of someone who's having a difficult time, you know, whether it's a partner, whether it's a parent, whether it's a child, right? This translates all across the board. So the number 3, an inflated sense of self-importance that's unrealistic. So in other words, these kids, they just feel like they're so much more special than anyone else, any other kids. They have this inflated, budding egos. They feel like they're more deserving than others to get the prize, to get the special treatment, to be first in line, to get the best toy, and so on. And they get angry and they act out when they don't get that special treatment. We'll be talking more about this when I mention the signs that your child might be narcissistic, but this is important, you know, and you can also see probably how some parents nowadays, especially those parents who are very active in the social media scene, who are, you know, who like to post their selfies, who like to post their status on Facebook, on Instagram, and what have you, and garner attention like this. They can sort of pull their kids into that, and because they're getting more attention, they may make their kids feel like they're also better than or more special than, and so on. So just putting a little asterisk there that our current social environment, our cultural environment, is very suitable for the development of narcissistic kids. And number 4, the inability to recognize when attention and admiration that's appropriate are given. So in other words, these kids are kind of like walking black holes. And again, adults do this too, of course. And they are constantly seeking this attention. They're constantly seeking this admiration. They're dependent on, they're addicted to this constant reinforced social validation. They need this praise. And you might give it to them, right? You might give them love, you might give them attention, but they constantly crave more. So there's very high degree of insatisfaction and very low threshold for providing satisfaction, or high threshold rather. They're never satisfied. They're constantly hungry. And why? Because they're unable to receive it. We're talking about very fragile sense of self, very fragile ego, very fragile self-esteem, real self-esteem, not superficial, you know, you're going to get attention and love because you look pretty, but I'm going to give you this constant warmth and as much attention as I can while tending to my own needs so that you feel safe. That's the healthy one. Whereas, and I've seen this a lot, I've seen this around, where a very narcissistic parent who herself or himself needs a lot of attention will neglect the child and just give them this praise in passing, like quickly, like, oh, you're so cute, or oh, you are so smart, you're the smartest, oh, look at my child, look, it's so smart, you just got this and this prize or whatever, or here, have $100, or here, have a car, you know, or new phone, you know, just sort of filling that hole that stems from the lack of that healthy attention and warmth with material things that are not satisfying, you know, that child will never be satisfied with those things and will always crave more. But it will be used to also to this very superficial type of attention and positive reinforcement. And they will detect, kids are smart, they can tell, they can detect It's not really genuine. It's not really coming from that deep wealth of love. It comes from that just desire to quickly check things off the list, check this kid off my list so I can now go back to doing my own thing. I hope that makes sense. So these are the 4 early symptoms. I will recap them. Number 1 is lack of emotional and social awareness. Number 2, lack of empathy. Number 3, inflated sense of self-importance that's unrealistic. Number 4, inability to recognize that attention and admiration are given and constantly seeking more. I hope you can hear this bird. I love this bird. It's outside my window. And it just has the most beautiful song. I hope this doesn't disturb you because this bird is really loud. But I hope you enjoy it. I just want to acknowledge his or her presence here. I think it's a he. I think this is a mating call, but I don't really know. All right, so now let's talk a little bit about the environment in which a child is that can cause the development of such traits, the 4 signs, the symptoms that I just talked about. There are no perfect parents out there, okay? All parents make mistakes. Mine have, and I know a whole bunch of parents who are my dear friends, and they also keep making mistakes, but they're also doing a lot of great things. They're doing the best that they can in general, okay? So what's really important to distinguish here is consistency versus accidental treatment or mistreatment of a child. So of course there will be times where we'll just give a child a phone, right? Because we're exhausted and we need that nanny for a moment. Or when we will dismissively praise the child, when we will not be able to be there when they really need us. This will happen. It's absolutely unavoidable. In fact, it's probably sort of balances the equation between a parent that's constantly attentive and one that never attends. I think that the key is to find a healthy middle, because a child also you don't want the child to always feel like you're at the every beck and call. That's also, I think, a dangerous path. And you also don't want to be neglectful. So a balance needs to be established, and also you gotta be able to draw your own boundaries to take care of your own needs, so the child doesn't feel like they can, in Poland we say, get on top of your head, right? And completely control you, which is what kids can be very good at. They're very skilled manipulators. The idea is to help them outgrow this manipulation by providing them with satisfying sense of security so that they can turn to other things such as creativity and exploring the world and building social connections with other children and other adults. So to make an impact in terms of making the child slide more towards a narcissistic development, these behaviors will have to be consistent. If these things happen once or twice, don't worry about it. You know, it happens to everyone. So I don't want you to self-flagellate, right? And if you are empathic, highly sensitive, and you are a frequent visitor on channels such as this, you may have a tendency to do that and beat yourself up about what a bad parent you are because you happen to have a narcissistic child. So not all of it is your responsibility. Not all of it is caused by you. And we'll talk about this in just a second, when we'll be covering the origin. So again, it can be very hard to draw a line between wanting to make your child's self-esteem to be high, because we all want our children to go out into the world feeling confident, and inflating one's ego. But here's the line where we want to draw between overinflating sense of ego and building healthy self-esteem. Overvaluing your child because of their skill or their looks versus providing a sense of warmth, affection, and emotional security, no matter what the child looks like or how smart, clever, talented, or intelligent he or she is. I hope that makes sense. So that's the difference. Emotional warmth and security versus quick overvaluation to make up for the lack that you may be aware of that is present in this child's life, just to quickly appease them. So now I want to talk a little bit off the cuff, because a lot of the stuff that I said thus far has been is from research, although a lot of it is also from observation as well. But generally, the way I like to think about how NPD develops is when a child lacks this emotional warmth from a parent, right? This can be due to two reasons, all right? Number one, so this is a little bit now, we're talking about the origin. Number one is you can have an inattentive, neglectful, self-absorbed parent, okay? So we're talking about more or less like a narcissistic environment in which this child is brought up, where this child will feel alone emotionally. It will grow up and develop with this inner deep sense of ache, like I'm alone. I think you know the ache I'm talking about. I actually recently wrote a post about it on Medium. This ache, it starts early. If you didn't get the attention, the warmth, the sense of security as a child, instead in its place there's this emptiness, this achiness that develops in our nervous system that can trail us for the rest of our life. And we can learn to deal with it in different ways. One way would be to try to get attention at all costs and go more on the histrionic narcissistic path. And the other way we do this is by pleasing others and doing everything we can so that others love us, and then we become these people pleasers. And I know that a lot of people who are here on this channel and who are highly empathic and struggle with narcissistic relationships have gone this path of people pleasing. I know that I have, and that was definitely in an effort to try to alleviate this deep sense of ache and loneliness that I grew up with in my own household, which had some narcissistic energies, if I may say that. Also had a lot of warmth and love, and that was unconditional. So I had a mix of things, but inadvertently, I think all of us at some point, maybe not all of us, but I think majority of us at some point in our life do go through this phase of feeling disconnected and lonely, and we try to figure out a way to cope. So one way is to have these inattentive parent, which makes a child overwhelmed with emotions. They don't understand, they don't know how to regulate them, because it's something that we should learn from our parents. And such a child will get very superficial care. Again, it's mostly based on materialistic way to appease and assuage this child. And you get this message, you grow up with this message that you're pretty, so you're loved, or you're loved when you look pretty, or you're loved when you're smart, when you get good grades. That's absolutely, I think, an environment in which this kind of personality can definitely develop. It's a breeding ground for narcissists. Then there can be another type of a parent, which is a parent that is very attentive, who is very empathic, who's doing his or her best, but it's exhausted. Maybe it's an only parent. It's confused because of the child's behavior. I'm going to talk about that in a second. And it's just unable to give as much care as this child deserves. So this child could be predisposed with a certain temperament, which will make it very difficult to regulate, if that makes sense. So this is not the parent's fault. The parent is doing everything they can. Could be two parents. They're doing everything they can. Or it could be that, which is very often, when one of the parents is narcissistic and one isn't. So now the parent that's not narcissistic has a narcissistic partner and a narcissistic child who has this difficult temperament, right? And this could be genetic. I am one of the, and I know a lot of psychologists and coaches out there will disagree with me. They say, nope, narcissism is purely nurture. I don't think so. I think it's a combination of nature and nurture. I believe wholeheartedly, I've seen this in my family. There's a trait in my family that's unmistakable, and I've seen it throughout my family tree, and it repeats to a T. It's genetic. Now, can it be helped? I think so. Maybe if these people got early help, but back in those days, there wasn't help like that available. This is fairly new. But no, it just developed, and it's in its full bloom now, and it's too late. So I do think that it's a combination. So such a child could be genetically predisposed, have difficult temperament. So they are, for example, they wake up a lot in the middle of the night. They can't accept failure. They get very upset when they get a bad grade. They want to have everything the way they want to. They want all the toys for themselves. They're envious of their siblings. They frequently get in trouble. They constantly need attention. And that child doesn't have NPD, but it's on its way to developing this NPD. And this poor parent who not only doesn't get any support from his or her partner, now has to carry the weight of both dealing with a narcissistic partner, being exhausted, and trying to have this child. And when you have such a scenario, the narcissistic parent could also use this. This just breaks my heart, because I see this so often. Can use this scenario to hurt the empathic parent even more by, for example, banding up with the child. And now they're together, they're working together in making the life of the mother. It's usually the mother, not always. Sometimes can be the father, and I've seen that. But let's just say the mother, even worse, right? And they can buy them off, buy them toys, again, make them feel so special. Like let's say the father is narcissistic, will make his son feel so special, and feed them with that self-inflation, self-importance as an extension of his own ego, that the mother just won't be able to keep up. And you know what's worse is that she will then go on and blame herself for it. How unfair and how deeply, deeply sad. If you identify as a person like that, please do take note and stop making yourself feel guilty and blaming yourself. You gotta see the big picture. Mistake we often say when we're under a lot of emotional overwhelm is our scope of vision narrows, and what we do is we see things in a very narrow context, and it usually bears the stamp of it's my fault, I did it, right? Because we want to have some control over our life, so we take as much responsibility as we can, but then it can just overwhelm us, So you have to always widen the context, take into consideration the whole constellation. I know there's such people do workshops called constellations, and I think that's really smart. I've never done them, but the idea is pretty smart, that you have to take into consideration the dynamic of the whole family, not just yourself. And this is where therapy often fails, because all it focuses on is you as a single individual. Also, some spiritual development work fails there, because again, it puts all of the responsibility on you, and sometimes in a very solipsistic way. I've heard spiritual teachers say that, everything is within you, like you creating it all, it's all you. And there is a degree of empowerment with that when we widen the context, but it can also make people take way too much responsibility for the family than they should. So just wanted to put it out there. Okay, so again, this can happen due to two reasons, right? Just want to quickly recap. We're half an hour. I knew this is going to be long, and we're not done yet. Number one is an inattentive parent, neglectful, self-absorbed. It takes one, especially when you have a child that has a difficult temperament and a predisposition towards narcissistic behavior. That's a breeding ground for little young narcissists. If you have two parents like that, lo and behold, hopefully there is a grandparent somewhere in the picture who can step in. Or the second one is an attentive parent that's simply exhausted and confused, doesn't know what to do. It's at her or his wit's end. It's doing its best, but it still will not be able to influence the child enough to help them not become narcissistic. All right, let's now look at the 8 signs that your child is a narcissist. Okay, we talked about the early symptoms. Now let's talk about, imagine more of a teenager, because supposedly, according to research, it's about 8 years old when a child can start getting diagnosed. So if your kid is somewhere around that age, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, and you will check off the points that I will highlight in a minute, you may want to do some psychological testing, because at this point it will be very helpful for you, very good for you, and for the child to get some help and get some therapy, get some coaching, and for you also to get some coaching, because I believe these next years will tell us, because this is still a relatively young topic where it's blown up in the recent years, but in the next decade or so, we will see how these therapies, especially when applied early, what kind of results they can yield us. All right, so 8 signs. Number 1, they put other kids down while highlighting their specialness and other people's inferiority. So again, continuing from early childhood when they would cause harm, they would sometimes deliberately say things or do things to make the other kid cry. Again, isn't it the same thing that they do in adulthood, right? These are, I always call them sandbox tactics. But it just looks so weird when you're dealing with a 45-year-old, right? I mean, gosh, how can they be really that childish? Yeah, they actually are. They regress. Part of them is in constant regression, but when they're stressed, the whole of them can regress into very much of a childish, tantrumy behavior. So again, number 1, they put others down, and they have to always highlight their specialness. I am better. I deserve this. Why didn't I get first place? Why didn't I get an A? I deserve it, even though you didn't do the work. And this person is bad. And did you see how she's dressing? Did you see how, this child is just looks horrible. It's so stupid. And, there's a lot of that sort of thing to, again, highlight their own self-importance. I've seen that a lot when I was growing up among a group of peers. And indeed, these people continue, even though they're now in their 40s and 50s, they continue to doing this. It just doesn't stop. But I saw it early on. Number 2, they blame others, including adults and their parents, for everything bad that happened to them. So they take no responsibility for what they did. It's always your fault, or it's their fault, or it's the teacher's fault, or it's that. And again, I'm not talking about black and white here. Or actually, yeah, I am talking about more black and white, sorry, because narcissistic children will have this black and white approach to things, like it's always their fault, it's never me, it's always them. But in reality, sometimes, yes, sometimes the teacher will screw up, sometimes we get bad narcissistic teachers, right? So again, you need to look for, is it tending towards an extreme? Is it tending towards consistent behavior versus one-off, right? Because these things do happen, we do get upset. Every child has the right to be upset when mistreated by a bad teacher or another bad adult. But again, it's never their responsibility. That's a red flag. Number 3, they display intentional destructiveness towards others. They may even enjoy it. They may have some sadistic behaviors. Also animals, right? A lot of psychopaths and people who ended up doing really, really awful things in their youth or adulthood, such as, really badly hurt others. I don't want to talk too much about this now, not to trigger anyone, but they may start doing these things to other creatures, to animals, for example, right? So these are also signs to look at. It's this intentional destructiveness, these displays of sadism. Number 4, they manipulate and have no sense of right or wrong, no moral compass. They will lie, they will cheat, they will twist facts, and they regularly get in trouble. Now, again, I'm not talking about this sort of soft manipulation that all kids do in order to get the cookie or to, not have to do their homework. I'm talking about this consistent, what? It's like when they lie when they don't have to lie. Yeah, I think that's how I would approach it, because again, it tends towards an extreme. And again, this is what adults do. This is what narcissistic partners do, narcissistic adults, toxic adults. They lie when they don't have to. Why do they do this? It boggles my mind. I have no idea. Is it a habit? Is it because they get some kind of a weird joy out of it? Maybe they feel like, got you, they feel some kind of a sense of power because they were able to convince you to believe in something that they know very well isn't true. Who knows? It's a weak, terrible, awful behavior. And if you spot this in your kid, take note. Number 5, constant validation seeking, right? So again, this continues from the early age. Compliments won't stick because the sense of self is extremely fragile. So if you are this kind of person who's done some work on yourself and you feel that satisfaction, deep satisfaction when you spend time with someone who can validate you, like truly validate you and express gratitude towards who you are. I don't know about you, but when I get that, it lasts a while. I can relish that for a long time. Unless I'm under stress, then I need to tackle the source of my stress and deal with that first. But in contrast to that, a narcissistic person, and I'm not saying that I'm completely free of narcissistic traits. I think we all have them. I probably have them here and there as well. I'm not going to pretend that I don't. But I try to work on them. But a truly narcissistic person who's consistently like that, it will just they'll take it and it's as if it just went, as we say, one ear in and out the other. It will not stick. It will not provide that satisfaction. They will want more. They will want more pretty quickly. So what do? They usually act out to try to get the attention. They're very loud. They can engage in histrionic behavior. They may seduce, right? Very common with people who are borderline. They're constantly in this seduction state because it gives them a sense of control also. And again, this keeps the validation coming. It could be the glance from a man. It could be the sense that they have the power in the room. They get all this attention. They move. Everybody looks at them. It gives them that self-inflating sense. And then when they wake up the next morning, again, this is I'm just remembering from my sessions that I've had with men who have been in relationships with borderline women. The next morning when they wake up, they just feel so empty. Even though the night before they were the stars, the next morning they feel very depressed because they don't have this validation that keeps coming. Sorry, I strayed into adult territory here. We're sticking with children. So constant validation seeking, they need this attention all the time. So they act out. Number 6, they won't let others take the spotlight. Again, so many parallels with adults, right? But they just really don't like it. They get very uncomfortable, very, very envious. Another child recites the poem or does the dance and the adults are clapping. They get really agitated and uncomfortable. Number 7, when stressed, they regress. They become like children again. They throw tantrums, even though they may be 14. Now they're acting like they're, 5 years old, and nothing helps, nothing appeases them. They need to, no logic breaks through. This episode just needs to pass, or maybe that doesn't ever quite fully pass. Don't know, but there's this constant state of this feeling of like I'm a child and I'm entitled to your attention. You may feel that as an adult, as a parent. And finally, number 8, it's gaze aversion. They have a very difficult time holding gaze, looking at you, being this stable person. Again, this requires emotional regulation, and unfortunately, not a lot of people have it, but some have enough to be able to sustain connection, sustain contact. Narcissistic children will not. Their eyes will dart. It's like they have something to hide. Also, people with ADHD may have that, and people who are on the autistic spectrum, that's it, on the autistic spectrum, they may also have that. All right, so far we've covered quite a lot. We have one more bit to cover, and that is, what can you do as a parent to cope with a narcissistic child? Number 1, if you can, seek help as early as you can. If you detect these signs, if you are pretty sure that there's a consistent narcissistic behavior in your child, I would seek help from a therapist, because the sooner you do it, the more the child can learn better social skills, which will make your life easier. And of course, seek help also for yourself, whether it's therapy or coaching or any other kind of support, could be group support, that will help you regulate yourself and keep your own container filled up. Number 2, learn about narcissism. And if you're on this channel, you're probably doing that already, but it never hurts to pick up a book, read another article. You know, we keep getting more and more material, more and more research come out. But also, I know for myself, is I go through these phases when sometimes my life seems completely narcissist free. And then I kind of slide into a bit of like that state of lull and just I just get a little bit more oblivious and then I'm hit really hard with something, and then I remember, and I have to sometimes reach from my bookshelf and reread some passages and remind myself what it is that I'm dealing with. It's really easy to forget, I think, for people who have this more on the empathic side of the spectrum. We sort of like to think that everyone's good at their core and life is good, and you know, we're all evolving towards this amazing place and time in our world where we all live in peace. And gosh, hopefully that's the case, but certainly looks way more complex than that. And you know, and sometimes we get these reality checks. So do learn about narcissism. Keep it consistent, especially if you have a child like that, so you don't fall for the tricks. And that's my next point number 3 for you: to spot and point out manipulations as early as you can. Do it in a gentle, non-accusatory way, again, not to aggravate the child even more, because again, they can get stressed and regress, and then you have a bigger problem on your hands. But somehow find a way to communicate that, to make them aware that they're hurting other people and that that's not okay, and that they're not going to be able to actually advance in life if they continue this kind of behavior. They do need to learn, even though it may not come naturally to them, they do need to learn to be more courteous, to listen to others, and sometimes to step back and let others take the lead. Number 4, I think this is sort of the crux of the work, is learn to set, maintain, and model healthy boundaries, right? Narcissists are master boundary breakers, especially children, because we have a soft place in our heart for them. They will also feel entitled if you're their parent. So you have to do this as early as possible. This could take the shape of discipline. You know, phone use, television use, food, sweets, curfew, when to come home. Like, set these boundaries early so they learn them. It will help them in the future. I wouldn't stray away from that, especially if you have a child that has narcissistic tendency. I think you're gonna need to find that sweet spot. Of course, being super restrictive, that won't work either, because a child needs to learn accountability. Oh, that's so important. Learn that there are consequences for their action. Okay, if there's one thing you're going to take away from this video, this is it. Consequences is so important, because so often we want to protect our kids and we take care of the consequences. No, let them face accountability. If they cross a line, if they do something illegal, send them to the police. You know, let the teacher scold them, give them appropriate punishment for what they did. They have to learn that there are consequences. If they don't, that's when they'll keep getting away from it, they'll keep getting better at manipulation, and they will keep repeating this kind of behavior. So set those boundaries. If they're adults and they, for example, tend to barge to your home unannounced, tell them this is unacceptable. They're gonna need to let you know with a phone call first whether you're available. Sometimes you may need to leave the room. I think that this is such a good technique. When someone crosses a boundary, says something inappropriate, you feel upset, get up and leave the room rather than arguing. Because again, they don't respond too well to words, or they sometimes are better at them than we are, because they are able to be less emotional in a moment. So just get up and walk away. If you're at their home and they're acting wrong, I'm talking about an adult narcissistic child, and they're crossing a line, get up and leave. Let them face the consequences of their action. All right. Don't give them your keys to your house. Don't give in to blackmail if they use it. You have to show them that you are strong, you're able to hold your own. If you show weakness, that will embolden them. If you show strength, even in small little bits, they will back down. So the more you do that early on, the better. You can't be too soft on your narcissistic children. Do let them feel safe around you. Do give them that warmth that you have. You're so good at that. But don't let them get away with things when they cross the line. Tell them about it. Show them the effects they're having so that they can learn. Some of them maybe will never learn. And in this case, all you can do is, that's my final point here, number 5, accept it, get the support you need, and practice self-care. But you can't blame yourself. Narcissism is a very complex thing. You can't think that you are solely responsible for your child being like this, because you are not. That's unrealistic. That's frankly narcissistic. Hey, I'm just gonna say that. If you accept self-blame for bad things happening in your life, that's a sign of a covert narcissism. I'm joking, of course. But I'd like you to think of it maybe a little bit in this way, because there is a little bit of that self-inflation. I know I've been guilty of that myself. And I know that the reason why I did that, why I accepted blame for everything, is number 1, I've been conditioned to doing this. But number 2, I felt like this could give me more control over the situation. Because if I did it, I can fix it. Unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. And it conditions your nervous system. Definitely did that to my nervous system, to be overwhelmed with heaviness and weight and responsibility. So when life gets better and lighter and easier, it almost feels weird and you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. Don't condition yourself in that way. Learn to spread responsibility, at least in your mind, equally, fairly among the different parties. So just want to say, this is hard. If you are dealing with this, my heart goes out to you. It's not easy. It's complex. Do not forget about yourself. And do let me know what helps you. Do let us know. I'm going to read these comments, but others will too. So share, please. How did you learn to tackle this topic? What helped you? Where do you feel you need more help? Yeah, learn to ask for help. Ask us, ask me, and maybe we can together help each other. So thank you so much for this. I also want to just make a very quick announcement. I am putting together a retreat with a group of fantastic women. This is going to be all women's retreat in Sicily, Italy at the end of September. There's a video I just released which talks more in depth about this retreat. And if you're a woman and you feel like you need to get away and spend time with like-minded individuals in a safe, beautiful, nurturing environment for 6 nights, so about a week together, do let us know. We're building out our email list now, getting all the people who are interested, the early inquirers. So the email address is below this video. Aneta is the one who's organizing it. Do let us know. And for now, I'm just going to say thank you for your attention. Thank you for watching this video to the end. I know it was a long one. I hope it's helpful. And if you know anybody who could use this video, do share it. And thank you for the likes, for the subscriptions, and the comments, because they help me spread this message out. So have a wonderful day. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.